Welcome to the Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast, bringing you the country's top podcast on the subject of internet marketing, with your hosts Glenn Thayer and the CEO of Intuitive Websites, Thomas Young.
Tom and I are going to dive into media pages and press releases and what they should look like on your website. Now, I mentioned before in other podcasts that if you have a subject you want us to cover, please let us know. And this one comes from one of our listeners, Alessandra. And she wants to know if we could do something on media pages, press releases. What should they look like? How should they be set up on a website? So I guess first and foremost, Tom, what is a media page?
Well, there's different ways to describe this, and people use these terms media and press interchangeably. But for the purpose of this podcast, and really for the purpose of your web marketing efforts, think of media as anything that's interactive on your website. A video, an audio, like this podcast, for example, Google Hangouts, an interactive slideshow, a graphic presentation, something that's animated. It's anything that the user controls and plays to get, an animation or some content back. That's media on a website. And then press is anything that's used to distribute your content. And press could be the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, or it could be a blogger in your industry who's influential, or it could be an association in your industry. The term press used to just be newspapers, and you think of newspapers and radio, maybe TV, that was press. Well, now the way that press is looked at has changed a lot, because every single person on the planet can be press, right? Somebody could put something on Facebook that goes viral and 1 million people can see it or read it. Is that press? Well, I think it is. It is press. So when we think about how to use media pages and the press on your website, it starts with your strategy. And this would be under a form of content distribution and traffic generation in your web marketing strategy. And your media pages are where you're going to host this content, the media content. And then your press release strategy or your content distribution strategy would be for how do you get content into the hands of your target market through whatever kind of vehicle you can do. And so that's kind of a summary of how these two things come together and how they work from the big picture.
Now, we'll also be seeing in some websites, and I know I've seen it personally, that you go to pages that are supposed to be for press, and it says media. And I think there's something that you also go back to, talking about press. Stop the press. News. Press was more printed, I think, is where we were before, and
right.
Media was anything for television. So if you were, in the media, that meant that you were on TV. Is typically where that was, and I know it's changed because more obviously the proliferation of Facebook and people be able to have blogs, and that now blog is media, being on TV is media. Being published is media, and then media is also the videos and everything else on your website. So right. I know there, and depending on where you go in the country and what city you're in, all of those will be interchangeable.
That's true, and the term media itself could be used to describe the internet. The internet is a media or form of media. So it gets confusing, but I think if you separate the two into what we discussed earlier, which is one is the concept of interactive content that's on your website versus content that you distribute through channels, which we would call press releases. That's a good way of defining these two.
So how would you define the two, the difference though between a media page and a press release or even public relations?
So a media page would be a page that might list all your videos, or might list all your audio tracks or your podcast or something like that. That might be a media page. That's what I would think of a media page. Now, there are websites out there that say media page, and then you go there and you see a list of press releases. So it does get confusing.
Or if it's for the media. I mean, I've seen that too, where they go, somebody wants to do a story on your organization, they have a media page for that. Is there another way to set that up, or are we getting a little ahead of ourselves?
Well, what's happening is it's just confusing in the industry, and I think it's confusing for users, and that's why I think Alessandra's question is a good one. But I would stick to those two distinctions, and I would think, if you're going to call it if you're going to call it a media page, and it's really a page for the media to come there and get information. You might want to say content about the company or information for the press or for
media
people,
inquiries.
Media inquiries, right? Something like that. It would need something more than just the word media. And I think that it's also important to understand the difference between your blog posts and the content you're producing for your site and what you're sending out and distributing for others to pick up and distribute to their target markets. That's all part of this strategy as well. And then if you're going to have blog posts, we've talked about blogging quite a bit, that needs to be really about your company, about your marketplace, about what's happening, with a focus on helping the reader. Whereas a press release has to be something that's interesting or new that folks would want to read, folks would want to learn about or go and get more information about, with a specific twist on something your company's doing. So if you have a new announcement of a new hire, a company move in your location, if you have a new product you're introducing, if it's newsworthy, that's a press release. Whereas a blog can be postings about a variety of subjects that have to do with helping your target market.
Now, do we have an example of something that we can show? I think we have one of these that we can pull up here as far as press releases concerned.
Absolutely. We have a client, lather.com, and we'll pull up their website. And what they've done to use the press to really highlight them as a company is they have a press page, which we'll show you here. And this press page basically takes a snippet of the cover of the publication and it puts what product was featured there, and then it allows the user to click through on the product and to see how they were featured in a PDF. And what's really interesting about this is it builds a ton of brand recognition for the company. It also shows that they're very well known and they have a lot of folks using this product. And it could be that they were just mentioned in a little tiny article with a product review. It could be that they just had a little reference to Lather in there. But regardless of what happened in that publication, it's listed on their press page or their media page so folks can see kind of how their products are being distributed. I think anytime you land content on any publication or website, whatever it might be, you want to make sure that that content shows up on your website, like what we're seeing there with lather.com. I also think that if you do press releases enough, you want to have a section on your website called press releases and then post them there. You can also use press releases as a foundation for a blog post or for articles. So it really becomes part of promoting not just your website, but links back to your site, which then helps with SEO. And we've talked a lot about SEO. We've talked about how important content is with SEO. We still don't want to lose sight of the fact that having important links coming back to your site will help your SEO. Even though Google now is reporting that they don't give as much popularity to links as they used to in the past, we still think it's important, especially from high-ranking websites like some of the publications we just saw.
Now, is it something then when you're going to do a press release then that you do need to be aware of SEO then? Is that what you're saying, is to make sure that you have some of those that search terminology put into your press release?
And the key search terms should be in there. In fact, there are a lot of companies that do press releases solely for the purpose of SEO, and they submit them. They submit these press releases through websites like prweb.com or pr.com. There's lots of resources there. And once they submit those out, they hope that the links coming back to the site will help for SEO. And then they post the content from the press release on their site. That's part of the press release strategy of what we're talking about. The media strategy is just highlighting, any videos or audio or any content that comes back that mentions your company, along with your own videos and audio and graphics that you produce. So it really is a way to take your user's website experience to another level, to really show them that the site can be much more than just written content. And it's also a way to really build your brand up. One thing I will say, though, about media and the use of media on your website is that people have preferences for media. There are people out there that will not watch any videos on their computer ever. They either work in a cubicle and it's too loud when they do that, or they just don't do it. And there are other folks that prefer to read, other folks that prefer to listen to things like a podcast on their commute. So it's better to give people a variety of media options on your site.
So speaking of that, if you have a little bit of a little video, let's say you've got a 3-minute video on your website, and you're worried about people not watching it, should you put a transcription of that video underneath it into that blog post, or do it as a blog post? Well, here's the video, and then here's the transcription underneath it, so people don't have to click on the video; they can just go right to the text and read the text.
I think it's a good idea. In fact, we've just started with this podcast having 2 versions of the podcast. We do the video in Google Hangouts on Air, and then we have an audio-only version that's streamed to iTunes. So people have the option of seeing the video or just listening to the audio. I think it's a good way to go. Now, we don't do a full transcript of the podcast, but we probably could. It would be great for SEO if we did that. It's a lot of work.
Yeah,
but it all works together.
Comes down to the last podcast on growing your team. We need another person for that.
That's right. You need another person.
That's the thing. I want to take a quick step back here because you keep mentioning press releases and going back, and where's the good place for it? Should it be in the blog, or how separate should you have press releases from the blog?
It depends on your website. I mean, if you have enough content on your website and you do press releases often enough, you can have a link that says press releases right on the website. And in fact, in some ways, that might be a better link than media, right? Because that's where people from the press can go to see what's new and current and happening with your business. If you don't do press releases that often, you might want to just incorporate them into the blog and list it as in a section in the blog. And you could also do both. It doesn't hurt to do both as well. It gives people the options in navigating your site.
Well, awesome. Well, what types of key action items do we have for our viewers and listeners this time around?
Well, I think that developing a plan around getting your content distributed to other websites, whether they're the New York Times or just a small blogger down the street, should be a part of your traffic generation strategy. And if you're writing good content in your blogs and you have a handle on that, the thing that's different about press releases is that you want topics that are newsworthy that can be distributed. So if there's things going on in your business or in your company that are newsworthy, get those distributed. One way to find out how you are being talked about and how these releases are going out is to sign up with Google Alerts. You can go to google.com, do a search on Google Alerts, sign up based on the key terms. One of the key terms to put in there would be your company name, so you can see how people are talking about you and what's happening.
What about key employees?
Key employees can also be put in Google Alerts as well. So when they're listed in a press release or any content, or if anything happens to them, they'll show up in Google Alerts, and you can say, "Hey, what were you doing this weekend?" But anyway, that's a good thing to have. Also, work with media and PR action items in your overall web strategy. Track all this in Google Analytics, and then make sure your press release content is on your website. Also, I have a book coming out, Winning the Website War. In that book, there is a section on press releases, a chapter on press releases with action items. You'll see how they fit into the overall strategy in the book.
And one last question for you, Tom. For people that are putting out there and doing a press release, how do you get the press to pay attention to your press release? Where do you go? Where does somebody who's never put out a press release before, where do they go? Obviously, they can read the chapter in the book, but where does somebody start?
Well, there are websites out there that will mass distribute press releases. So if you have something that's really a hot topic and newsworthy, you can use those websites to distribute your press release, and you might get hit upon because it's hot, right? And it's a hot topic. So if you have something real exciting and popular, you'll get found. That's not usually the case, though. Most of us just have normal day-to-day things that happen, and we want to get that information out there. The best thing you can do is have a relationship with someone either at a PR agency or firm that has great connections, or a relationship with the people that work at that media outlet or that press outlet. That's really the best way to get found.
Make friends with reporters is what you're saying.
Make friends with reporters and have newsworthy items.
Well, fabulous. Folks, thanks for joining us again. And remember, if you want us to talk about a specific subject, make sure you drop us a line at info@intuitivewebsites.com. Thanks so much for joining us.
This has been an Intuitive Websites Internet Marketing Podcast. For more information and to see all the available podcasts and much more, visit intuitiveblog.com. If you have a website you'd like us to review or an issue you would like to see covered in future podcasts, email us at info@intuitivewebsites.com.